2001, Dark Age of Camelot was released. Since then, seduced by the poetry of its rich universe and the purity of its challenging gameplay, millions of players ventured the mythical lands. The large community built the legend of the game with millions of small and big stories to tell about battles, friendships, and life. Our game is getting old. While the player steps are slowly fading away, while the red, green and white lands of the three realms are turning grey, poems in low resolution are caved in our memories. But in the night of Dark Age of Camelot, some stars will shine forever. Some names are remembered for their personality, some others for their unique qualities on the battlefield. A boy from USA combined all those blessings. He was humble, and he belongs to the pantheon of the best players to ever touch Dark Age of Camelot. Today, we're gonna tell you the story of the legendary Napkins. To evoke the Napkins' history, we have to go back to the years 2007 to 2012. It was a time when Dark Age of Camelot entered a new dimension and reached a peak in terms of possibilities. Computers and internet connections were finally good enough, and suddenly we had YouTube and a ton of information about the game and esport in general, like how to set up your computer, your mouse sensitivity, your monitor refresh rate, and more people were also playing with voice communication softwares like TeamSpeak or Mumble. And at this point, players had for material all the experience gained by the pioneers of the game for almost a decade. Thousands of teams and guilds videos, so we started to have a real culture about setups and how to form groups. Also, the community was still well organized around guilds and friends groups, deeply rooted in the game ecosystem, with players who had known each other for years and were trying to improve together over the long term. And then the world cluster happened, Ewain. It mixed different Dark Age of Camelot cultures, and the game turned into a huge laboratory for multiple setups, players, and multiple teams. Also at this point, the devs were aware about the game balance and the pure beauty of the material they had in their hand. For example, led by the ex-Aviator player John Broadsword, they made crucial changes that opened more possibilities in terms of setups. Spec heals on Friars and Warden root on Chanter and Bard, etc. During this era, players also had access to a ton of items that opened so many possibilities to align their templates with their playstyles. We already had all the Trial of Atlantis items, rogues, artifacts and emails, and now the game gives us champion levels items and some new labyrinth and event items like Medal of Honor. The huge changes of the new dragon items also added various possibilities, with key items giving Trial of Atlantis bonuses, insane procs and huge utility values, allowing players to have even more choices around. Only playtime and players' imagination was the limit. This emulating atmosphere allowed the emergence of exceptional players, always thirsty for trying new things, finding new setups, testing new specs, and calculating new templates. Napkins was one of those guys who pushed all the possibilities together, and he remained in the collective memory as one of the most brilliant and shining demonstrations of how good and exciting this Dark Age of Camelot era was.
I didn't realize video games could be so just long-lasting and important, and that there was never an end to the game. There was always something to do, something to innovate, always something to learn and get better at. Even after 20 years, you could always find something to do to change how good you are, to change the game. And that's why the subject of this video was so important, because I think he always did that. Our friend Napkins, I would typically call him Greg. On the U.S. servers, a lot of the time, once you got to know someone, you always call them by their first name. In fact, with Greg, I met him as Black Napkins. He was a bard when I met him in probably around 2009. We were doing in the IRC chat program. That was where all the 8v8 kind of centered from. There was a lot of IRC pugs and things like that. And I'd been around that scene and community for a good while before Greg came about. And I remember fighting him in one of his maybe he wasn't in an IRC pug at that time, but I remember fighting a group he was in and being so annoyed at this bard. I didn't understand why I was always interrupted. I didn't know who I was fighting. They were kind of what we would call randoms, from a sort of maybe an elitist perspective, which is, just kind of how it was at the time. But I was like, why am I always interrupted? What is going on? Who is this guy? What is he doing? And then I remember, some people would throw around the name Black Napkins. Some I haven't met him yet. I hadn't talked to him in IRC or anything like that. But I remember fighting him a couple of times. And then I saw he put out a video, and he had the new icon set on the video. And normally, I don't know why, something about the new icons always just turned me off immediately. So typically, if I saw a video that had new icons, I would quickly turn it off, or maybe have a negative view going into the video if I didn't know the player or something. But I remember watching this guy, and wow, he was so quick, so good. He seemed like he really knew what was happening in the fight, and he was able to manage his bards are really unique. To kind of go sidetrack, bards, minstrels, skalds, things like that, where you are all you're there to do is really be a nuisance, especially in that meta where bards were constantly locked down. They typically had pets all over them, so they weren't doing a lot of casting, but managing your insta DDs, and I think at that point bards had 2 insta DDs to interrupt with, and also your 2 instant amnesias. Using those well was sort of how you would separate the mediocre bards from the good bards from the great bards, and you could really feel that as an opponent. And so I certainly felt that with Greg. That was the first thing I noticed. And then once I saw how he played through his videos, I was like, wow, this guy, he's special. He has that quickness. It's not, it's one of those things. It's almost instinctual. You have to just kind of have it, or you don't. I feel like with those type of classes, and he certainly did. Learned a little bit more about him. He's been a good player for a long time. I didn't know him until, like I said, around 2009 probably. I'm sure he had gotten better and better and better through the years, like we all had. But by the time I met him, he was really good, and he only got better too after that as well.
I probably met Napkins, I would say, somewhere around 2007, and I don't know if that's the actual timeline of the clusters or not. All that's kind of vague to me looking back on it, but I think it was 2007 when the Killablair cluster kind of got big, and we had moved from Devon to there. That could be wrong, but he was playing with a ragtag group called Held Friends, and he was playing a Skald at the time. Greg was pretty shy, especially early on, so he would just kind of like join pugs just randomly based off of what he told me originally. And some of the low-end groups, they don't really care about skill sets. They're just trying to get people in group and go out and run, get RPs, jam stuff, and have some fun. And that's kind of how Greg started playing. And we were on Aggermon, AV8. Wasn't arenas back then. It was, you'd run out to Aggermon. You'd see how many groups were in IRC, and then you'd go out there and roam around for a little bit, and you'd get your share of fights. And if you were winning, you'd stay until it kind of flushed itself out. Or, if you were one of the lower groups, maybe you try a few fights and then go back to the mainland. Back then the meta was very much, you were pretty heavy on one side, either around 2007, you were either heavy caster or you were heavy tank. And so you were either.
But I'm pretty sure Napkins came from a smaller population server, because like not many people know about him before you, Wayne. Which is also, I think, speaks to his intuition. Like if he was playing on a low cluster server that didn't have AV8 action and he got as good as he did with like out any practice is pretty insane. Because like I guess like just speaking from my experience, I played on a server where like the action, like it definitely wasn't the best players to start. And so when we got clustered and we started playing against all the best teams, like Dylan had a team and Kuji had a team and News Team was there. We like had to learn a lot because like the game was like played very differently.
So probably around 2010, we started to get together a regular PUG, is what we would call it, pickup group at the time. People like Adelator, formerly from News Team, me, Daeg, Risky Milk, who's well known and eventually will become even more well known in relation to Napkins. My friend Zaze, Quell, Trick, Corey, Sade, a lot of people. So this was kind of the group. I'm leaving off a lot of names, but there's a tons of, it's probably about 15 people, and we would constantly just sort of rotate within that 15 person roster about what the group would be, and that went on for years, honestly, a couple of years, from 2010 maybe to 2012, and we eventually had a guild on Hibernia called Herd of Donks. But we would just always play together regardless of if we were in a guild or not.
I was making pugs with this guy called Daeg, and I think he knew Napkins and Obe. So I think all of us started playing through IRC, and then just like had a lot of fun making groups, and everybody was very nice, and like it was like zero rage, and everybody was like super competitive, so it was really fun. So I think that's when we started playing. And I don't remember when we like became like a full-on group, because there was like a rotation of like probably 10 players, but Greg was like always in the core that played all the time.
So after a few years, we'd made a couple of various guilds on various realms. We had the Hibernian Guild, Herd of Donks. We had an Alb Guild called Trap Card. Why Are You So Happy on Midgard? The names of the guild aren't really important. At least they weren't to us. It was just the people that were involved. They were important. And I'll probably, like I said, forget a lot of people. But at Jordan, TVR, Trick, Zaze, Risky, Quell, Daeg, Corey, Zaze, a lot of these guys, Nazo, things like that. And like I said, I'm probably forgetting another handful of people, but we had played together for so long, had such a good relationship as friends, Falros as well, that it was almost, we would log in, at least from my perspective, log in and hang out with your friends.
On the NA servers back then, it was very, push or very pull. Like there was, you were either full running away trying to collapse on stuff, or you were, full bore pushing into that. And, we were running a caster setup, and that Hail Friends group had ran into us, and we were pretty much stomping them pretty regularly. And then they'd gotten a new Scald, and they were pushing us, and we weren't killing them in 30 seconds like we had normally had. And I started noticing the Scald. And he was just dinking around, just interrupting the shit out of us. And I was like, who in the world is this? This one guy is causing this many problems in our group. So, like Obi had said, everything was done through IRC and VM boards. So my thing back then was, how could I make my group better all the time? So I quickly found out what his name was and was snooping around trying to figure out how I could get in touch with him, and I did. And my joke to him was, I always picked him up off the streets. Hail Friends in this situation was the streets. So I recruited Napkins to come play with us. And he pretty much played with me every group that I ever made.
What most people know him as is Swoopkins, the minstrel, from his phenomenal solo videos.
Let's stop a minute to talk about the huge repertoire of classic videos produced by Napkins. Around 2010, his videos were among the first wave of videos produced in high definition. And unsurprisingly, it was a huge hit. Combining a high level of play, variety of playstyles and POVs and classes, plus the high production quality, his videos are probably some of the most successful and most viewed videos of that era. Notice that trance music is the hallmark of Napkins' video style. Formed by hypnotic rhythm and sound, this kind of electro music was a style listened to a lot by hardcore gamers back in the day. It helped maintain a high level of energy, APM and concentration. A lot of StarCraft 2 players and World of Warcraft speedrunners used to listen to this music for hours.
So Napkins and I would sometimes be frontline partners in a variety of combinations, whether it was like maybe I was playing Champ and he was playing Bard, or I was playing Mercenary and he was playing Minstrel. But he was always so good at that aspect of 8-manning or 8v8. I mean, even if you were fighting 8v16, he was always so good at walking the tightrope of a frontline player, especially in the meta that we played frontline at. You weren't really just flying in and sticking someone, stick and click is what we would eventually call it. You weren't going just full, full push. It was a balance. And Greg, Napkins, Swoopkins, whatever, he was so good at finding that balance. He would say, "Hey man, you just got to bob and weave." It was so easy for him, but for most people, towing that line of being a frontline light tank or a minstrel scald, something like that, always so difficult. So he would always talk about bobbing and weaving. So when you're up there with him, you really had to pay attention, and he would communicate, but you really had to pay attention to what was he going in, was he going out, what your job, how do you play off of him, and how he was going to play off of you. So it was a really, you really had to have a good relationship in that aspect. And that was one thing that I learned a lot from personally, and I was able to up my game playing with someone like that, and really learning from him on how to do that and how to play with a high level player in that regard. And I think that's where Greg, to me, in a group setting, really shone bright, because he was always able to do that. And also, just on the class thing, if he was playing Minstrel, you have 4 instant interrupt abilities, and then your flute mez and things like that in a pet. That's a lot to managing reuse timers, knowing where the priority interrupts are, and also knowing, well, if you're doing a Merc Minstrel frontline, where your mercenary is and how you can play off of him, how you can play off your Thurgis. He was so good at that, because that requires a lot of thought. It also requires a lot of technical skill. In StarCraft they call it APM and stuff like that, being able to have those fast actions per minute, to be able to quickly click on someone, quickly hit your instant interrupt, quickly go and click on the next person and interrupt 3 people in a second while managing your pet. He was one of a kind at that, I think, and it was a joy to play frontline with him.
He was just an absolute phenomenal player. He would absorb anything that was taught to him early on, when he may not have had the knowledge, but then he quickly took that knowledge and evolved it into new metas. And what I mean by that was, like I said earlier, like NA was pretty much either full running away or they were full pushing. And quickly we would adapt and start running hybrids more so. And we were able to do that by splitting fights. And Napkins, without coming up with it, like, just started applying pressure as we're running away. We were like attempting to full run away still, but Napkins would identify opportunities as people were pushing into us, figuring out that they were vulnerable and could not pay attention to them, and he would push the envelope and push into them while we were pulling, and it would just absolutely wreak havoc on them. And without knowing that we were doing it, Napkins was inventing the new meta. He was just a genius like that. And it was so funny too, because he wouldn't explain what he was doing. He would just kind of be like, "Hey guys, I've kind of got all their support tangled up here. You could probably kill somebody." He was funny like that. So fast forward a couple years until when the Euro servers collapsed and full came over to here. We were in a situation where in the summertime we could play a lot of Euro time, and myself and Napkins got together with Igor, and then we met up with some Italians, Hawk and those boys, and we'd play with them. We'd call it Euro Oof. I think the original crew was named after some rap song or something that we silly made it, but that was a whole new opening to the game, because we'd never played with European servers, and we'd always heard about how cool it was over there, and it was a different IP and it was impossible to log on. But now this whole European server, from 2:30 to 5:30, 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time during the day was like the most Agramon action that you could possibly dream of. And you just got to have so much fun with people across the globe. And here we are, just meeting people across the world and playing this, at the time, super old game, and just having a blast. And Napkins, you know, coming up with these metas and, you know, forcing other groups to play a certain way, and then everybody watching his videos, and it was just an absolute blast. And at that time, you know, YouTube wasn't super big yet. You know, everybody was still at the end of the night trying to get better, having, you know, reviews of how the night went, you know, things that you could improve on. And Napkins would record every single night. And then at the end of the night, before you go to bed, he'd upload it on FileFront. Everybody would download it, and then we'd be talking about it in our little IRC channel. But he was just a tremendous player. You know, the videos that he would then go on and upload on YouTube would, you know, develop future players. Like, I mean, you got to think, like, somebody doing, like, he would take a character, and this was the thing that I appreciated about him the most. Is like, you know, I never really played the small man game, so I would put, you know, certain spells on my bar. You know, I would do certain things that were involved in a group play or a group versus erg play. But he would take, like, styles that had no business being on your bar in an 8v8 scene, and then, like, put them on there for small man so he can maximize the full potential of a character, like positionals and stuff. Like, that wasn't heard of back then. Like, you know, a reactionary stun or a block or evade chain or something on a minstrel, like, that's kind of wild. It already had, like, crazy buttons before everybody was doing auto hot killer and stuff. Auto hotkey. He was just a revolutionary, and, like, nobody told him to do it. He didn't have people to watch. Like, that was just his brain power doing it. And then he puts all these cheat sheets on YouTube, and now you've got, like, unbelievable players like, you know, Halle Bell and Torm, who eventually become some of the best players this game's ever seen. But, like, they get a blueprint to watch, like Napkins, so they can steal bits and pieces of his game to, like, level up their style. And then new metas are evolved from, you know, watching great players like that over the years. It's just, like, there's very few players across, you know, the 25, 26 years or whatever this game has had that's been that impactful. And crazy part about Napkins is he was able to do it while being a quiet person. He wasn't loud, you know, he wasn't braggadocious. You know, he didn't beat his chest to anything. You know, he could run around with some terrible players and wouldn't even, you know, think anything of it, or he could run with the elite players and still never think anything of it. He was just a tremendous person, great player, and just an absolute brainiac.
This is where someone like Napkins is so good, because he was phenomenal in the 8v8 scene, but he could also go into a completely different play style, like being a solo minstrel or small man, things like that, and just flip the game on its head. And he would do that with minstrels, and at that time, minstrels were so good in the solo game. There's no doubting that. But the way Napkins, or Greg, or Swoopkins now, as many of you would know him as from his minstrel videos, or fighting him and getting just so frustrated fighting him, he was able to just take on 5-6 people, no problem. He was so good at managing these fights on his minstrel in a 1v1 situation that a lot of people weren't doing at the time. It takes very specific people to have the patience and the mindset to, you know, to play the long game in a 1v1 situation, or a 1vx situation, I should say, because his videos were definitely not 1v1, they were definitely 1vx. People like, and there's a ton of them, but just off the top of my head, Tennyson, he had tons of videos, various classes, and TVR, they would do stuff like this. They were so good. But Greg could also do that in a 1v, or a solo situation, but also be able to innovate the game and move the game forward with his 8v8 and 8-man play. But I think his most impact came from his solo videos. Honestly, they were phenomenal. I think a lot of people saw what a great player with a great class could actually do from videos like that, and other players, but Greg was certainly one of them. To me, he was phenomenal. Seeing him in, like, I think at one point in one of the videos he killed 7 people. Just ran up to a group, and they might have been doing. They were in New Frontiers. They're all level 50. They obviously weren't great players, these people, but that's okay. That's, he was able to, create opportunity.
I guess around 2009, maybe 2010, I forget. Whenever OOF, our guild's run, kind of came to an end because the action was kind of dead. That group was, myself, Napkins, Igor, Vorge, Low-Tech, Risky, Obi, Quell, like all kinds of people in that guild. Falros. We had a phenomenal group of people in that was interchangeable. Once the NA action really started dwindling down, if you weren't playing EU, the game was kind of suffering a pretty good bit at that moment in time. It had some rebirths along the way, but NA was pretty rough. Around that time, we kind of stopped playing. I would talk to Greg super often. I would talk to Risky pretty often, but they really weren't talking about Dark Age. Then all of a sudden, they sent me a link to their YouTube video, and it's Dark Age. And I'm like, what in the world is this? Is this an old video or something? And I open it up, and they're duoing. And small man, back then, 8v8 guys, at least in A time, did not really small man or solo at all. You were basically an 8v8 player, and if you weren't on the island, you really weren't logging in, especially towards the end of the NA prime, before I would consider the game kind of dying out a good bit. So when he sent it to me, they were duoing. So I'm thinking to myself, is there even anything to kill mainland? What am I about to watch? So I go into it, and I'm watching it as him and Risky. They hadn't canceled their accounts. They hadn't quit like everybody thought they did, and they were out duoing on a minstrel and a sword. Also, at the time, the people that were duoing, or trioing, or four-manning, or whatever the case may be, they always had heals. So here they are in a duo. This is a Sork and a minstrel, no heals. Start watching this thing, and they're taking on 4 to 8 people at a time. Some cases even more than that. Templated people. It's blowing my mind. And they're going into a main field. They're maximizing what their characters' abilities are. They're cycling CC perfectly. They're taking themselves in and out of combat so that they can use spells that shouldn't even be on their bar to keep them alive. And they're putting on an absolute masterclass of what a minstrel and a sorcerer are capable of doing. It was absolutely stunning. So they post this thing. It starts going crazy. It's got unbelievably good music, because Risky was always phenomenal at picking tracks. And it might be one of the most watched Dark Age movies of all time. I know it's been rehosted several times. I'm not quite sure, but you just watch it, and as a player that's aspiring to get better, you could watch that thing probably 50 times within a week and find things that you didn't even realize he was doing if you put it in slow-mo. Him or Risky. Just watching something dissect it, how they're in the middle of a cast, they may click off of it and do a statty or do a DD charge or something phenomenally wild that's not even thought of or heard of doing. And it gives them the ability to stretch out a fight and pull 8 to 10 mediocre people and kill them with 2 people with no heals. It's absolutely nuts. So, you see them doing things like that, and then the new generation comes in and they're able to look at it and see it and dissect it. And, you've got new things that you can use on computers and hotkeys and all kinds of things. And they take that and elevate it and go to the next level. It's just wild.
So my friend Zaze and I, we eventually, when the groups would die or before the groups would start, we would start duoing just to pass the time, because we were friends. We had a lot in common. So, we would sit and chat, and then we'd eventually duo. And then we he's my friend to this day. And sort of from that, I think Risky and Napkin sort of said, hey, well, we can duo too. Let's give this a try. Risky was, he was a sorcerer player at the time. He was also a healer and he played everything, but he was playing his sorcerer named Plop. And Plop and Swoopkins decided to form a duo, and together, you've probably seen plenty of the videos, they became Plopkins. Because it was kind of, Zaze and I became Zazless, because a combination of our names, and Risky and Swoopkins, or Plop and Swoopkins, became Plopkins. And their videos, honestly, the Swoopkins videos were very impressive. The Plopkins videos were wow. Like, the things they were doing with just a sorcerer and a minstrel. They were extending groups. It was very similar to Plopkins in how he would be patient and manage the fights, but with Risky, who was an incredible player, probably the best Sorc healer player I've played with. They were able to do some ridiculous things. No heals, no sustain in that regard, but you couldn't tell. Somehow they would use CL abilities, champion level abilities, like they were elite, imbalanced class abilities. The things they were able to do, get the most out of their classes, was just incredible. It's things you as a viewer, if you haven't seen these videos, you should probably go look them up. Hopefully you'll be able to see some great background footage here. But Plopkins, phenomenal. Risky, phenomenal player. Swoopkins, phenomenal player. They became good friends. I think they just like probably running around and talking as much as they like killing full groups. So, that's what Dark Age of Camelot, honestly, to me, is really about. It's the the people you meet along the way and the things you do with them. I think Napkins deserves to be known as a Dayak legend because he was so innovative, he was so adaptable, and he wasn't limited by one play style. He could do it all. He wasn't afraid to take risk and change the meta. He was always trying things, and he was successful at it too. He didn't try and fail. He tried and succeeded most of the time. And his versatility in all aspects of the game.
I don't know if like he would even consider himself like a Dayak legend. Like, I think that he's so humble, he would never say that. To me, it's just like the way that he could understand the game was the most. He was just intuitive for even more than Dayak. Like, his intuition is just so good. He just knew the right thing to do. Like, seemed like innately. You didn't really have to tell him anything, or he like knew what to do. Because there's all the other things too of being like mechanically good, which I think like a lot of US players are mechanically good, and he was also mechanically good. He also like did shit that's crazy, like his minstrel videos. Like, no one was really just running up, trying to fight 6 people at once. I think that's what a lot of people remember. I don't really remember even his solo videos that much because I was like so uninterested. I'm like, I just want to 8v8. So I don't know if I watched all of them.
Napkins is a legend to me because he is a innovator that is not a copycat. He is somebody that can look at something and see new possibilities within the game that has not already presented itself.
He's like always so he was always like very patient and like kind, but then like if he felt like he was getting ignored, he would yell. So there was like this clip of us saying to heal Quell, heal John Quell, but it's like that's not his character's name. So he's like, who the fuck is that? I don't know who that is.
Okay, we can push a little bit. They're fucked. That's alright. They're a little fucked. Push.
He's fine.
Who's John Quell?
Kill this Gilded Spear.
Peddling, sorry.
My target.
I got your
Take it. Nice. Okay, push back in a little bit. Push back in.
Who the fuck is John Quell?
peddling.
God damn it, David!
Yeah, it's wild what Dark Age and forming an 8-man group can do for you, not just in the game, but like I try to tell people that are in Dark Age a lot. They ask me like, some of the stuff that I do, you know, professionally in business and stuff. Like it's very similar building a business with building an 8v8 team and how you play within the 8v8 team as far as tactics and schemes and skills and stuff. Like formulating and putting the right people in the roles is very similar to building a gigantic business. It's managing people like a sports team. Everybody in that group of OOF, if you remember them or not, like Napkin or Obi, Napkins, Risky, Igor, Vorge, Low Tech, Quell, like all the guys that became like the best NA players were in that group with us. And I don't know if you remember fighting us at EU time or not, but so like a few of those things and that I mentioned in that, like calling his grandmother to get him to wake up, like they will all absolutely have a fit laughing. Like we would get in Ventrilo and we would just be waiting for one person every single time. And it was Napkins. And he would sleep in the afternoon because he would stay up all night and he would trade. He would figure out how he was going to trade the next day on his stocks. And so he would just be sleeping all day long. And he messed up and gave me his grandmother's number. And I would have to call her. I'd put it on speakerphone and I'd set my phone down. And everybody would be in Ventrilo just waiting to see how I could troll his grandmother. And she was so sweet. And I wasn't being mean to her. I was being very sweet to her. But if you were to ask her how she knew us or how Greg knew us, she would have thought that we lived and we were neighbors down the street or something. She had no idea we were across the United States playing video games with him off the computer. So we put it on speakerphone and I'd be like, "Where's Floppy? I need you to go get Floppy up. He must be being lazy in the bed." And she'd be like, "Greg, you gotta get on the computer. That boy Dylan's on the phone." And everybody in Ventrilo would just be dying laughing. And this would happen like every time we play.
Daniel, stop! Daniel, stop! Daniel, stop! Stop! Stop!
Shut the fuck up.
Great.
How do we win that fight? Holy shit! Get off me, bro! Jeez! Are they hitting? No, we're good.
Well, there's no way we should have won that. I don't understand.
Nice fucking heals, bros. Group?
Yay, we can win.
Yeah, we're gonna go.
Yay, we can win.
Always.
Oh.
Hey, that's not how that works.
Warp! 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 Lurkins! 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 No, I want to play Paladin. Yo, here's tip number 1. When you want to get in a group, just say Paladin. Don't say Saracen. Yo, I got my own Paladin. We can run fucking 5 Paladins! Yo, I'll peel the Hulk, bro. Bring him over here. He's unpeelable! He's unpeelable!
You wouldn't happen to have Napkin's number, would you?
Calling Napkins right now, dude. I'm freaking calling him.
How late were you on last night, Powers?
Not very late.
Very late.
Like 2.
Yeah. I think I crashed at like 1.
Dag, go ahead and tell Napkins what you want to tell him. Dag.
Napkins, boot up.
Okay, you heard him. We're in Adams Ventrilo. Mid, dude. And he said we're about down mid. We're in the channel right below the lobby. Sir Foul Rush channel. It's right under the lobby. You can't miss us. We got Corey, Dag, Foul Rush, and myself in the channel. Like I said, like right when you enter Ventrilo, it'll be the channel right under the lobby. All right. You take care. And if you don't call me back in 5 minutes, I'm gonna call your dad, and then your mom. Okay. Remember, I picked you off the streets and hell friends. This is Dylan. Talk to you later. Oh, what's up, man?